Welcome to Soul of Travel, Women's Wisdom and Mindful Travel. I'm your host, Christine Weinbrenner-Eyrich. Each week, you'll hear me having soulful conversations with women who are tourism professionals, trailblazers, and community leaders around the world. They share their personal and professional journeys to inspire you, and their stories teach you how to become a more conscious traveler, live life aligned with your values, and create a positive impact. We are thought leaders, action takers, and heart-centered change makers, and this is the soul of travel. Zoe Shapiro is a hotel marketing director turned travel entrepreneur who loves building communities and curating experiences, which she has the joy of doing as founder and CEO of Stellavision Travel. Zoe's boutique travel company offers behind-the-scenes, small group travel for feminist travelers. Zoe was recently included in Travel + Leisure's A-list as a travel expert in female-focused travel. When Zoe moved to Italy, she thought it was for 1 year of remote working and exploring the country that had been calling to her since she was young. She'll share more, but she found that she just couldn't leave. Zoe has frequently traveled alone, with zero regrets and many incredible memories, but found herself craving a travel community to belong to that didn't compromise the style of trip she loves. So she, like many of the women I've interviewed, created what she needed: Stellavision. Zoe lives in Rome with her dog, 2 passports, and far too many LPs. In our conversation, Zoe shares about this year-long adventure that has become a lifelong journey. We talk about creating a more welcoming and inclusive travel experience and the size-inclusive trips she offers that have created a much-needed space for women to show up fully and have the fun and freedom they have dreamt of while traveling. These experiences have been featured in the New York Times and Condé Nast Traveler. I asked my guests to share 3 words to describe themselves. Zoe chose entrepreneur and culture vulture. Join me now for my soulful conversation with Zoe Shapiro. Welcome to Soul of Travel podcast. I'm your host, Christine, and today I am joined by Zoe Shapiro, who is the founder and CEO of Stellavision Travel. And I am super excited for this conversation. I was just telling Zoe that I have been following her for a really long time, and I love the idea of your business. I love all the stuff that I see that you're sharing on social media, and I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Me too.
Well, before we jump in, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself and tell my listeners just a little bit more about who you are and what you do in the space of travel right now.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I'm a founder and CEO. My background is in marketing. I worked for boutique hotels and lifestyle brands, went freelance, and then I'm sure we'll get into the story that got me into Italy and this business. And then I founded Stellavision, which is a boutique agency. We do luxury itineraries for solo travelers and inclusive group trips for self-identifying women throughout the country.
Amazing. Okay. Well, yeah, I definitely want to get into the backstory and the how you got here. So, the first thing I'd love to hear from you is how you got into travel or when you caught the travel bug. Did you start traveling early on in your life, or was this something that happened as you were an adult?
Um, I wouldn't say I started traveling early on in life, but I have an international outlook, let's put it that way. My parents are South Africans. I was born in Scotland. We moved to Toronto when I was 5, which is where I dropped my Scottish accent in Canadian kindergarten like a little conformist. And I went back to the UK at 18. So I'm a bit of a mutt. I learned recently I'm what you call a third culture kid. And there's definitely that like fusion, that melting pot in my perspective. And I think, on a subconscious level, like I belonged nowhere. I wasn't quite Canadian enough for my peers. I wasn't South African, nor was I Scottish. By the time I got back to the UK at 18, it was very clear that despite having been born there, I couldn't perfectly identify because I had grown up in a different country. So I think without even realizing it, perhaps that just led me to keep looking like, where could I go? What's open to me? And I sort of developed this life of travel. And I quickly realized that my travel goals didn't always line up with friends, whether it be time off work, budget, goal, like travel actual goals. So I became a solo traveler as well. And that sort of culminated in what was planned to be a year in Italy. I was freelancing by that time. And I had come here with a great intern back in the Eastern Standard Time Zone for what I thought would be a year. And then month 11 was March 2020 and everything changed. Um, Essentially, I got stuck. I got stuck in Rome. And I mean, back then we called it coronavirus, and I had the Canadian embassy working to get me out, and it just wasn't going to be a possibility. So I essentially planned on doing the first lockdown here, and my Canadian visa expired in that first lockdown. And then I also looked down the road and I realized Brexit was looming. This was 2020. And if I had any moves to make just to give myself some flexibility, because who knows what was going to happen between sublets and careers in Toronto and me and my dog being stranded in Rome. So I took a bit of a gamble, got my Roman residency, and then I made what I sort of term like a spontaneous decision about a long time plan, which is I knew one day I would have a business and a brand. I knew it would be in the female space. I knew it would likely be somewhere in the travel and hospitality space. And Stellavision sort of became a convergence of my marketing background and my year in Italy and all of my experiences rolled into one. And I took a huge gamble and started a travel company on the back of the pandemic.
Again, I feel like I've said this so many times, but there are so many of us that the pandemic, was the exact time that we started our businesses intentionally or unintentionally, and it's so interesting seeing how that happened, especially being in tourism. Um, and then also seeing there's a few women I've spoken to that also were kind of stuck wherever they were, and that greatly influenced the trajectory of things, and so it's interesting to think, like, in that moment, I'm sure it seemed really vulnerable and a lot of unknowns, but looking back, does it seem kind of like obviously nobody wanted to go through a global pandemic, but did it seem like a synchronous part of your journey to have you put there?
Absolutely. Like, I will be the first one to say that my experience feels pretty faded. From the part where I was originally supposed to leave for Italy October 2018 instead of April 2019, which would have had me back before the pandemic started, to the fact that I was in that particular. I mean, I took an Airbnb in Rome for 4 weeks, did a handshake deal for 6 more months, and ended up living there for over 2 years. And it built relationships and friendships because my landlord slash next door neighbor was a peer. So I have a huge debt to her. And then, yeah, I don't think the way I would kind of define it is I can be pretty um, bold, but I'm not necessarily a very lateral thinker. So absolutely, I planned this year to go off to Italy, but it didn't really occur to me. And if you like it, you can stay. The plan was always sublet my apartment for a year and return. And then when the plan got torn up, not by me, then I had to begin to rethink things. And it feels very synchronous for sure.
Yeah. I wanna go back and talk about how you were saying that you really don't feel like you had a place that you belonged based on all of the places that you grew up and no one place, like, claimed you or you felt you could claim. I'm curious how kind of maybe that search for belonging influences the kinds of travel experiences that you create.
I mean, I think there's probably an intermediary point there because I think it affects the kind of traveler I am, and the traveler I am affects the travel experience I create. I've learned through Stellavision, we're going to be going into our fifth summer now as we prep for 2025. And the more I pivot to what feels personal and resonant, the more success and the more my clients and travelers resonate with what I'm offering. So to go back to your question, that I think from like an early age, I was looking for transportive experiences, experiences that were less about like checking something off a box, um, and more like I would rather go to an art gallery and come out with a sense of three things that I saw than take in the whole exhibit. That's just the way my brain works. And I kind of feel the same about travel. Like obviously you want to like submerge yourself into the experience and you want to pack it all in, especially if it's a bucket list destination. But truly what is more meaningful to like run around a country checking things off a list or for years and decades to come to remember the interaction you had over, this piece of cheese or this like task that they tapped and poured for you on your trip to Italy. And I would argue it's the latter. So those really experiential, and I think that probably goes back to my marketing career as well. What I was most excited in, I mean, I was a sort of Jill of all trades. I oversaw a department. But the things that I was most excited by was when we could build an experience. So, I'm a fan of building that experience. I'm a fan of doing things a little bit differently. And I think that filters down into the way I run my company, whether it be for private clients or the actual experiences I build for the groups.
Hmm. Well, that's absolutely the way I travel as well. And I think that's probably also what resonates when I see what you're creating. Um, And I have something else I want to pick up on that, but I want to just kind of talk about this idea of experience forward because you have a marketing background. So this is a great question for me to ask you. But it seems to me I've had difficulty in conveying the power of that beyond this idea that people are thinking they're going somewhere for this certain checkbox, right? And that's not going to be important. It's this connection and it's these moments and it's these usually happenstance experience, even though we do our best to curate the perfect journey, it's still this outlier that's the moment, right? How do you communicate that?
You're curating and you're not present. Yeah.
How do you communicate the value of that? Or how do you, I guess, convince travelers that that really is where the value lies, not in checking the box, but in really truly looking for that connection?
Mhm. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest and admit that I don't think I've found the perfect way to articulate it. I think I have had a tremendous amount of like I don't want to say luck because it's not an accident, but one marker of success of Stellavision is that like we draw the right people. And that's not to say there's a wrong kind of person, but most of my clients are people that are excited about listening to my advice. They know that I'm on the ground here in Rome. They know that I'm coming from a place of experience and passion, and they are very open to recommendations and things like that. That being said, like maybe it is my background in marketing because I've worked for tough clients and I've worked for tough CEOs. And I sort of view it as my job to make the best possible recommendation I can. That is what you're going to pay me for. And I'm going to give 110% of myself to that. If you choose not to take it, that's totally fine. And what I always say to people is, like, I'm here to make your fantasy, your dream vacation come true. Now, I can tell you that the Amalfi Coast is going to be a gong show and it's going to be crowded and it's going to be a huge amount of steps and expensive meals. And I would love to send you to Ischia instead. And it's completely fine if someone says to me, no, my dream is to take that epic photograph of the Amalfi Coast. Fantastic. Let's make that happen for you. I can give you my best recommendation and we go from there. But very luckily, we like, I joke that we have different clients, and some are low maintenance and chill, some are wonderful but high maintenance, some are like, it doesn't matter. But I'm very fortunate that on our tours, especially, which are such a community driven enterprise, we haven't had one nasty, malintended, difficult person that made the group uncomfortable and made things difficult for us as the staff or their fellow travelers. And so we're very lucky to draw the Stellavision kind of traveler, someone that comes here with an open mind, someone comes here grateful for recommendations. And I think that's just about letting myself be known and putting out there who I am, what I enjoy. I had a great affirmation this past weekend when I have a two-time traveler named Lizzie, who I'm just such a fan of her. She's a young woman who can afford to go on these incredible vacations. And she's been with us twice on two group trips. And she sent me an email saying, like, I'm spoiled. How do I find a Stellavision in the next destination that she's visiting? Because she's been to Italy 2 years in a row now. And I said, look, I can't pretend to be a destination expert there, but I have a lot of personal travel experience in this area. And I have a lot of transferable skill sets. So if you want me to plan your holiday, I'm going to drop the charges because I'm not, I'll make my commission, sure, but I'm not going to charge you because A, she's like a very valued return client. And B, I'm not a destination expert. I'm just someone with personal travel tips. But that's how I started my business, being a savvier than most traveler, and build it up for there and build the professional network and then call out the people who like to travel like I do. And
Mhm.
that's how it's kind of gone on and on.
Yeah. Um, so the idea of kind of like getting it right for right now and
Yeah.
pivoting and then aligning with your true identity, and that being, you said, not luck, but alignment. And I think all those things like are huge game changers.
Mhm.
And I see that in other businesses, and I'm sure you can relate to this. You start with this idea of the way you think the tourism industry works, or the
Definitely.
way you go about it, or what you think you're building, and then all of a sudden you're like, that wasn't it. Or it gets stuck, and then all of a sudden you question that, or you tweak one thing and you dial in on that, on the value set, and then you start being able to communicate it. For
Absolutely.
you, what did that feel like from the push start to now? Yeah.
Oh gosh. I mean, I always say that I'm an experiment without a control group, like both in my personal life and in television, because I mean, is it my late 30s? Is it the move to Italy? Is it the pandemic? Like, who knows what has set me on this particular path? And the same is true with television. Like, I know that I offer my clients a superlative experience and more than just the travel experience, like a level of care and personality. Now, if you forecast 10 years down the road and hopefully I have a business that grows and scales, how's that going to look? How is that like culture going to be distilled? I can't tell you today, but that's not today's challenge when you're a business owner in their first few years of business. Um, but from the time I hit go, I would say that, like, there was a lot of imposter syndrome, for sure. The way I kind of explain my television career trajectory is I actually have 2 jobs. One is as a travel entrepreneur, and the second is as a business owner. It's my first time at both. I had a certain level of professional expertise and I certainly excelled in the roles I held before this, but I freelancing for yourself and working for a company are two very different things than owning a business. And being a savvier than most traveler is a different thing than being a travel entrepreneur. So in the early years, I would say that when I pressed go, I hit that button, the imposter syndrome really was present about the travel entrepreneur. And I would say I've overcome that for sure. I really stand by what I offer. And I know that I facilitate just like a certain level of ease and comfort and really exceptional experiences, some of which are like on par with incredible luxury experiences in Italy. Like I can get you up in a helicopter over Etna. And as luck would have it, the volcano put on an amazing show for my clients that day. Am I the only one to offer that service? Of course I'm not. But I can do it. And it was flawless. And they had a wonderful time. What's a little bit more unique about me is I sort of take my personality and my experience of a traveler and infuse that into the business. So while I can offer that kind of a luxury experience, I can also offer like the luxury of like atypical concierge. So for instance, I have arranged for a tattoo artist to get to a remote Tuscan villa with 24 hours notice. And everyone on a trip got a tattoo that wanted one. And that's probably a little more unusual compared to some of my luxury concierge peers. And I love that Stellavision and I can encompass both of those things. And I feel as though I have earned the right to put that imposter syndrome to bed. I will be totally frank. The journey as a business owner, the journey as a business owner is it's still one of growth. I have things to learn. I have, places that I really need to buckle down. And it's in this interesting moment of trying to grow the business at a pace that allows me to focus on where my skill set lies and bring in the support and ensure that there's multiple salaries that can recompense different people. So that's where I am, and it's a sticky spot. And I'm sure once I get through that, the next phase will be scaling. And how do I do that in a meaningful way where I really do have a one-on-one relationship with almost all of my clients, and that will change, but I know that what I offer is worth bringing to a bigger number of clients. So I don't think, it'll ever be the growth, the change, the friction of business ownership will ever be done, but it's always going to be a bumpy journey. And I would like say that anyone who owns a business, anyone who's a like self-employed, a solo entrepreneur, and they say, smooth sailing, they're lying. They're lying. But so it's, a press go and just like we were off to the races. But it's been different challenges and different stages. And I anticipate new challenges in the stages to come.
Yeah, thank you so much for, like, saying it like it is, which I, of course, expect you to do, but, um, it I think no one becomes an entrepreneur because they don't want to grow, and if you did, you made a wrong choice, like
But what's
yeah.
actually interesting is beginning to evaluate how I want to grow and how big I want to grow.
Mm,
Because, to be further transparent, Stellavision is funded by a smart decision I made as a freelancer. And I was offered equity in a company. And it was a startup. It did incredibly well. Everyone worked like dogs. I have like a trauma bond with those colleagues. And like to be perfectly frank, it made us wealthy. It gave me the ability to invest in myself and my company. And it was pretty miserable. It was pretty miserable. And that wasn't my company. I was obviously working for someone else's vision. But I was back home visiting Toronto and sitting on the couch of a girlfriend who we met through working there. And she sort of made an off the cuff comment about, oh, one day when Stellavision is sold for $200 million. And I like recoiled. I don't want to, I don't want to do the kind of work. I don't want to work with the kind of people that would create that opportunity for Stellavision. To be perfectly frank, that's not why I'm in this. Do I want to grow? Of course I do. I want to grow creatively. I want to grow financially. I want to build a team. Maybe Stellavision goes to other countries. Like there's an exciting future of growth for me. But I don't know if it's the Italian experience seeping in as well. But the idea of working that hard for that big a payday and growing to like, I physically recoiled at the idea. And he was just being supportive, of course, and wishing me well and, you know, wanting the thing that had happened to us on someone else's dream to happen to my dream. And it was a very, and I hadn't really thought about it before, but in that moment, I realized I don't want to grow that big. I don't need a company that's worth that much. I want to earn a good living doing what I love. And yes, I need to scale, but I don't ever want to scale that big. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll
Yeah.
singing a different tune in 20 years, but remind me of this conversation if I am.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting because I think, and again, this is something that I've talked about with many people, but the idea that when you start a business, you have to know where you're going, which we've already debunked. That's not true.
Mhm.
And then also that it has to grow for the sake of growth, or like that success is this growth, right? And you just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And that means you're succeeding. But to know that you have, and of course it could change, but right now you have like an end point where that feels like a comfortable place to grow to that still feels aligned with your values.
Totally.
I think that's a bit of a new conversation where people are saying like, I only want to be this big.
But I think it's especially germane in our industry because as we deal with over tourism, I mean,
Uh-huh.
the fact is if you like and not just in our industry, like whether it's clothes production or any number of things, but I'll speak for what I know. I mean, part of Stellavision's brand promise is to see Italy differently. Again, I'll get you to the Amalfi Coast and I'll do it with flair if you want to go to the Amalfi Coast. But I want to show you the spots of Italy that are not so overly touristed. And it's also important to me to show them to you respectfully. I'm not going to take a group of 30 people and, selfie sticks and flags through a small, sleepy town. I want to take a group of, 10 or 12 people to have earnest interactions with locals. And there is a problematic side to this notion of scale in the travel industry because more isn't better for those that are visiting a place, those that live there. It's not sustainable. And like we're beginning to see Italy bring in some real measures to fight over tourism. And I would certainly be heartbroken to see, some of the small towns that I cherish, some of the places that I visit in my summer vacations, which of course I send individual, respectful, right clients to. Um, I don't want to talk about those at that top of line of a big piece in the New York Times and have everyone descend upon this small little haven that can't really sustain that level of tourism. So yeah, I think your point is an excellent one. How big do we want to grow? And I think it's something in our industry that we have to be really responsible about as well, not just for our own sake, but for the places that we send business.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that that's something that I really feel I noticed when I traveled when I was younger. Like I would just notice that, in certain places where you're like, we're too much here.
Mm,
This is just not right. And I didn't know what about it, but I'm like, man, this is we're doing a disservice by being here. We're no longer experiencing this destination. We're overtaking this
yeah,
destination. And it doesn't even for me as a traveler, then I'm not even getting what I'm there for in the first
right.
place, right? Like I think we're really seeing what that balance is. And I love so much that you're expressing that so fully because I think that the responsibility that we have as travel creators and designers is immense. And as content creators and storytellers and all those things, like we wield the like arrow where people go. And we are the ones that if you run a trip here, this is where the people are going. So we have so much more power than I think we ever understood in being able to shape what the industry looks like and feels like. I think before we were so caught up in meeting consumer demand that we're just like, build it, build it, build it, build it, build it. And I think more people are learning to say, No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially on the back of the pandemic. I mean, Italy's largest business is tourism, right? And on the one hand, you have the number one most visited country in the world, right? So it's not exactly starting from nothing, but then you put like a Bosch through all of that business and people were really struggling. And then we were just grateful to see the business return. But sure enough, now we're like looking at the problems. Like the Jubilee is about to start here in Rome. So in 2023, we had the largest number of travelers ever for the year, which was 33 million. And they're projecting the same again for 2025. And they're expecting 30 million religious tourists as well. And as a Rome resident, I'm thinking, like, I don't think I'm going to catch a taxi next year. Like, and what is my plan? Um, but it was interesting what you said about like over tourism and as content creators and we shape the story because another idea that I've been toying with recently is like in this idea of over tourism and how to manage it, there is no unbiased adjudicator. There is no one without a stake saying, actually, this is what I want, or this is what would be the right amount. And of course, we see places like city centers and mayors adjust Airbnb policies. But mayors have terms, and their viewpoint is not necessarily everyone's viewpoint. And some people are hungry for the revenue, while others are looking at the problem that the lack of rent for locals is creating. So, again, I'm not going to change the world even in my own industry, I'm like not even a fingerprint. I'm barely a like hangnail. But how can I, in the values of my business, be smart about the way I affect, um, particularly those gems that, where I can send valuable business in that people that are respectful, people that are there to put money into the local economy without disrupting it in an ungainly way. um, it's also a very privileged way of traveling and a privileged way of being. So it's something I'll continue to evaluate. And it's why I'm so grateful for conversations with fellow travel entrepreneurs like yourself.
Yeah, I agree, and I was just gonna ask, like, how much does this conversation spill over? I suppose not in your more custom trips, but in your group trips. Is this anything that you talk about with your travelers? Do they notice any of this difference as compared to any of their past travel experiences? What is that dialogue?
They can certainly feel it. Now, for logistics' sake, our travel always starts in a big city, whether it's Rome, Palermo, Florence. That's where the international airport is, and that's what makes sense. And almost without fail, we get out of the big city. Like we spent about 18 hours there. And you could argue that there are so many more sites, restaurants, there's so many more things to do. But my travelers quickly understand the value that we offer of showing you an Italy less traveled and offering those experiences. So, where they have questions, we bring it up, certainly. One thing I always like to stress is like not just what is by the book respectful, but what is the local version of respectful. And to be frank, it's never been a problem because I don't have disrespectful clients and customers. But for instance, like we have a tour photographer on every tour. And one thing I always talk is like, where is that line of capturing an experience with reverence and, it's well intended and where is it invasive? And, I sometimes each photographer has a different line. I know where Stellavision's kind of line stands, and I ensure that that is enforced. And that's more of a staff conversation than a traveler conversation. But it can be, I mean, the places that are, this is a terribly overused expression, but off the beaten track, the Italian culture is such that they're often quite charmed to have us, especially because, we're not rowdy, we're not littering, we're not being disrespectful or loud. We are inquisitive about their culture. We are putting, euros in those shop tills, and we're being very respectful and interested. And that is such an Italian culture. They want to share the best of their country with us. And that is such a privilege of being here and working here as well. So I wouldn't say that like a formal conversation has ever arisen, but people certainly feel the change in the atmosphere as soon as we get out of Rome, get out of Florence, get out of Palermo, and enjoy these less visited spots.
Hey, it's Christine, dropping in to share one of my favorite things I do each year, my women's book club. If you've been craving more connection, growth, and community in your life, I have the perfect invitation. Join me for my Soulful Book Sojourn, our virtual book club just for women. We'll dive into books written by inspiring women, authors whose wisdom and stories help us reflect on our own lives, and the magic that happens when we come together to share, connect, and grow as a community. We take 2 months to read, discuss, and integrate all we learn from each book, and it's really more of an in-depth study than your average book club. Our next journey will be in March and April, and we'll be reading The Soul of Money by Lynn Twist. And then in May and June, we'll read My Mother in Havana by Rebe Huntman, who will also join us for a special author discussion. I'd love to see you there. This is your chance to be a part of meaningful conversations, soul-deep connections, and experience the joy of being a part of this incredible group of women. Visit lotussojourns.com/women's-book-club to learn more and sign up. Let's make 2025 a year of healing, growth, and vibrant living together. I can't wait to see you in the circle. Now let's hop back over to our soulful conversation.
Well, I had the line from your website of professional photographer on each trip as one of my talking points, and I love that you talked about kind of the line of understanding where photography is appropriate or what that looks like, having a conversation. And that reminded me, I took the Rise Travel Institute anti-oppression and tourism course a
Oh,
couple
wow.
of years ago, and they have one of the chapters is on ethical travel photography. And um it was very eye-opening. Again, it was like one of those things I noticed as I moved around the world with a camera. I studied photojournalism for a while, and so that was a way I literally viewed the world. I would notice how that felt. Like some people, that was like an invitation. It almost gave me like more credit to be there because I had this camera, and maybe that was important. Maybe I wasn't just a traveler. Maybe, who knows? It would give you permission in some places. And then in some places, it would be the thing that would close the door because people didn't want to have a photograph. They wanted their privacy respected. Culturally, maybe it really meant something to them to not be in a photograph and or to have their children photographed. So I think there's that aspect of having a photographer, and then there's also the idea of being present, which I was gonna run a trip in Peru that didn't get to happen during the pandemic, but I was not gonna allow people to have their phones out or cameras out except for very limited parts, and we had a photographer coming
Mhm.
because I wanted people to be
In the
in
moment.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you about what your motivations are behind the professional photographer.
So that sort of circles back to my own experiences informing my business, because nothing is as valued a souvenir to me as my photographs. I am a total addict. Now that we've co-hosted with some influencers, I can like compare the number of photos in my phone to theirs, and it's appalling how many I have in comparison. Like, my pictures from my travels mean the world to me, and they're kind of like the best souvenir because they're capturing those moments. However, there is certainly a style through our current social media ethics, culture, whatever you want to call it, that creates a lot of distance from being in the moment. So this notion of having a professional photographer on a tour kind of presents two opportunities for those who want to turn their devices off and be on vacation for a full week and still go home with a, professional caliber photo set. They can. And for those who are Insta addicts, no shame, I'm one of them, and they want to be posting in real time for the people back home, they do get an album nightly. But what I found is in either instance, people tend to put their phones away because they know the pictures are being captured. And there's less of a, oh my gosh, I can't miss the shot. They know someone's there with the camera getting the shot. So it has inadvertently, for two completely different types of travelers, created a similar, and that's not to say that people don't take pictures, they do. But I find that there's certainly less emphasis than there would be otherwise.
Yeah. I think it's such an interesting way to create, yeah, just another conversation or another piece of awareness. Well, I want to get to why I found you in the first place. We talked a little bit about your group travel experiences, and the trips that you were running that are really focused on body positive travel.
Mhm.
And as I was reading a little bit more about you and thinking about this conversation, I remember reading something about, you know, when you're traveling in Spain or Italy or certain parts of Europe where so I'm 5'10". I guess I would be considered plus size by some worlds. Um I will feel uncomfortable in a swimsuit at this point in my life more so than I would have in the past. But I remember the first time I went down to the pool with my daughters when I was in Spain and we traveled for like 5 months together and I was like, I feel great here. I do not feel the same pressure that I feel in other places to look and be a certain way in my swimsuit. This is something I maybe was aware of, but not, I just hadn't experienced that before. And then a few other places we went. And by the end of the trip, I was just like, I don't even care. And it's not a worry. And my experience is so freeing for me. And I think that's why when I saw the trips that you're creating with that intentional acceptance and inclusivity and thought, I just thought, gosh, this is really incredible. And it's also just this beautiful statement of allowing women to be who they are without any pretense. Like that allows, I would think, the connection and the engagement and the experience to be so different. So this is what I want to jump into. I want to talk about where that came from for you and then how that's been received by travelers and other people in the travel community.
So, your experience in Spain was my experience in Italy as well. And this was before I knew I was staying here. Um, Much like, if I went to Jamaica for a week or something like that in my previous Canadian life, the first day getting all of the accoutrement and the jewelry and all of the trappings to distract. Um, and by the end of the trip, maybe you're a little bit more comfortable. You're just like the shock of it is gone. Um, it was sort of like that times tenfold when I moved to Italy. And my philosophy on this was that the sea and swimming is part of the lifestyle here in a way that most of us North Americans aren't used to. And even for the, people who live in California or are beachside, things like that, um, the media is doing something very different. So the bottom line was that no one, especially on a 40-degree summer day, is going to deprive themselves of getting in the sea or getting in a bathing suit just because of the way they feel. And there's certainly standards here. Some of them are more antiquated than what, the needle has moved to in North America, but it really is self-driven. If I was a 21-year-old girl dating, I might be in a different, camp. But for our travelers who generally skewer in their 30s, who are like single, not single, traveling alone, traveling with a friend, a family member, something like that, I think the biggest opportunity that these size inclusive trips are is in the community. You know before you get here that everyone has signed up for this trip. And to be honest, at times, some people are signing up for it because the dates work well for them, right? But they still know that they're coming to a size inclusive trip. And we were very deliberate. I say we, it was my first collaborator, Christina Winkleman, and I about naming these trips. Like, I'm a fat person, but we didn't want it to just be about fat travel. It really is about inclusivity. Everyone has hangups getting into a bathing suit. And knowing who you're showing up for or showing up with dispels a lot of anxiety, I think. I can't put a protective bubble around my travelers. Would that I could, but we can set certain values and let it be known that this is the standard to which we're holding each other. And the greatest compliment I can give my travelers, or maybe the pat on the back I can give those of us who are working on projects like these, is that it sort of goes without saying. And everyone is comfortable with one another. We're gently monitoring situations to make sure it remains as comfortable an environment as the one we intended. I can think of one occasion in 3 years that we've been running these trips that we're like, okay, maybe a third strike might merit a soft conversation. Didn't come to that. So really, it just creates, like you say, you dispel with some of the initial, like we all have our hangups. I could be embarrassed or shy or a little like slow to bloom about any number of things that have nothing to do with my body. But that's a big one. It's a big one. And we're taking that barrier off the table. And as you say, like it forges friendships quicker. It just makes people more comfortable just to like know what the parameters of the community or the experience is going to be. And then where I can, I'm working really hard in the background to make sure, you know, if on day one I meet someone who would benefit from a chair with no arms, I'm doing what I can to ensure that the restaurant I've booked on day 4 has a chair with no arms, that kind of thing. But that's between me and that's the like under the water swan stuff that the travelers don't see.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's recognized, especially for travelers, that that might be the reason why they were afraid of this kind of experience in the past or intimidated to put themselves into that experience. I think it's really beautiful to have that intention behind it. I just was thinking as you were talking of this trip I led in Alaska, and it's a place that's off grid. And so there's no running water.
Well,
You take a shower in Fairbanks before you leave, and you don't take one again until you get back. That's something that some women are like, nope.
yep.
But it's interesting. It's not often not nope because I don't I need a shower every day. For some people it is, obviously, but
Mhm.
it's like I won't be able to uphold a standard of beauty that I feel like I might need to maintain in a group of women. And like we would get there and like my dear friend traveled with me and she's like, I took my bra off and I'm not putting it back on until we leave. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a trip I'm here for. And by the end, like we all have like messy hair and we're wearing our ski hats and like, just the level of, like, all of that stuff
Mhm.
off. Yeah, I think we don't realize consciously how much energy that takes. And I know that's not what, you're saying is happening, but I think there would be some element of that barrier being removed or that energy also being released just in knowing that no one's expecting you to show up any way other than you are. Like, even if I'm packing to go to Paris or something, all of a sudden I think I'm the woman who has the perfect pair of jeans and the right blazer and the perfect blouse and the perfect earrings, which today I'm wearing like my t-shirt, right? That's the woman I really am. But when I'm traveling, all of a sudden I think I'm going to magically,
Fast
sex
and
and the
Furious.
city or something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm wondering, like for you, how much of any of that was behind it or what kind of conversations were you having or hearing that made you realize this was something that's necessary?
Um, well, I guess it's also the reason why our trips are for self-identifying women and non-binary folks comfortable in female spaces. Like, love men, person like I'll plan a trip for honeymooners, for a group of brothers, a family, no problem. But I remember being a traveler on a group trip with couples as a single woman, and it changes the dynamic. It changes the way you look and present yourself and interact with people. It's just a different vibe than when women show up together. And I think the size inclusivity or the queer inclusive trips, they're just another layer of that where all of our travelers are very different. Some of them have very different experiences, life experiences. They hail from different states, education, whatever that may be, countries as well. But when you know that this group has signed up to show up for something like this, and there is that sort of mutual level playing field. Like some people are still fashion plates. Some people are nothing but like sweatpants gals. God bless each and every one of them. But they all know we're not here to dress for men. We're not here to socialize with men. We're not here to worry about how we look in a swimsuit or um, ordering a second portion at dinner because this is a community. I wish I had a better way to express it, but I think it's true of every community. Like there's ways that I relate to Canadians and there's ways I relate to Jews and there's ways that I relate to Glasgow graduates, and yet I'm nothing like any of them. But when I walk into those communities, just like when I walk into a group of fat women or women that are sensitive about size, inclusive, or representation issues, I might not have anything in common with them, but I know that we share a value. And that is incredibly powerful. And that alleviates one layer of not only like, will we connect or connectivity, but like we actually connect on something that's pretty important in my life to me. And it forges some really amazing bonds.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, it's unifying and accepting in an area that's usually one of our tenderest spots, right? And that's just, like,
Absolutely.
so I think so important, and I think, like you were saying, groups of women, I think it's even more important just because there are so many spaces where that's not allowed or in our lives that it hasn't happened and we've been excluded for
Truly.
whatever reason.
Even if it's just the labor of like testing the water and making sure that this is a space where it is allowed, because it might be, but if I don't know you and you don't know me, and you show up looking in your jeans and blazer and your fashion Paris outfit because today you want to make a good impression and I do the same, you would have no idea that I'm also a sweatpants and a t-shirt girl. And I would have no idea that you're also a sweatpants and t-shirt girl. But when there's an unspoken rule that we can both show up in our sweatpants and t-shirts, which is also what I've done this evening, I did put on a necklace just because it's 10 p.m. here and I didn't want to fall asleep and I needed, a little bit of a perk. But you already know who you're dealing with into a certain extent. And I think that is the privilege of Stellavision. Like you create a certain playing field that exists before you even arrive here. So just like I tell my travelers that I want their vacation to start before they leave home, I take care of all of the planning, I take care of all the question marks. And you know how much time a savvy traveler puts into planning their vacation. So just like they can expect a certain level of ease before they even leave their homes, they can be confident before they even leave their homes. They don't need to test the water. They don't need to spend the first 2 days pulling that information and that bonding. They know, okay, if she's shelling out X amount of money to be here just like me, this must be important to her too.
Mhm.
Or we can just enjoy Italy together.
Yeah. Oh, I love it so much. It's like, one of my groups as well, like, they were like, "It's you're arriving, like, into a hug instead of that
I love that.
spot," right? Like, of not being sure where you fit in or how things are
Yeah.
gonna feel. Like, you just arrive, like,
Yeah.
settled and embraced, like, you feel welcomed, and I just think it's really important.
It's really
Um
empowering is what it is. And it
Mhm.
lets you show up as your full self on day one instead of finding out, is it okay for me to be me in this environment?
Yeah, and what a gift to get to be in a room full of people who are their full selves because
Yeah.
I think that's when also big magic happens, and when you're traveling in a group of women to see everybody just lit up is like, and I'm sure, as someone who curates those experiences, like, witnessing that is just, like, the five-star moment, like,
I
yeah.
mean, I almost had this like idea of a business and I was like, I want to do this thing. I think I'll be good at it. And didn't fully appreciate, as foolish as this sounds in retrospect, how it would change my life, how it would evolve my own self discovery and acceptance and the relationships that I would form. Like, I'm professional, of course, but it's amazing. It's amazing that when you offer people the chance to be themselves, when they're coming to you because they want your version of Italy, what that creates and what that does for our relationships as well. It's been such a privilege. Yeah.
Yeah. I think so many entrepreneurs create, especially in travel, I've noticed, and especially amongst women, create the space we needed, whether we knew it or not. And we create the space that we needed to heal in or to grow in. And we're like, oh, like you said, you get a little further in and you're like, oh, I see what I did there. That
Yeah.
was good.
It's a shame of me for not realizing I was doing this all along, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, one more thing I just wanted to talk about really quick before we get to our rapid fire questions,
Sure.
especially in celebrating women. I love your blog series that you have that it's women doing cool shit in Italy. I was like, I love this. So I
Thanks.
just want to talk about that a little bit.
Okay,
This,
so I actually that is going to be moving on to social media because my ADHD brain sometimes gets caught up in it has to be this, that, and the next thing. And the blog posts are fantastic. But that means that the social content doesn't always go live if the blog post isn't ready and perfect. So we are taking that series and we're moving it on to social for 2025 because, like you, I love it. I think it's fun and it's what I'm interested in and it's who I want to introduce my travelers to, the woman doing cool shit in Italy.
yeah, I think it's great. And it's a fun resource and it's a great way. I mean, we meet so many people when we travel. And I think, like for me, celebrating those people, even just in a moment, it's really important. And so this is a fun way that you can just
Mhm.
celebrate those people and bring them out into the world
And like,
through
for some
your
people, I mean, one of the people I put a spotlight on is my former next door neighbor slash landlord who's a jewelry designer. And some people want to come to Italy and buy a tchotchke, and some are like, no, I'd rather shop somewhere meaningful, but in another country that I wouldn't have access to back home. And they've bought her things. And other people have met Courtney Mills, a opera singer who performs for our groups. She's currently on an incredible stage show in Puglia, like a world acclaimed soprano. And I know they're still in touch. I know that they're still like have developed that interaction into a friendship. So the women you meet, like they're a blog post, they're a social media post, and they're also, your friends, your vendors, like the people you would relate to in your hometown that are here. And it's a privilege to be able to like shine a light on the amazing things they're doing and introduce them to my travelers.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. And I love that.
Ooh.
Okay, we're to the rapid fire
Do it.
end of our conversation. So what are you reading now?
I am actually going back to The Birth of Venus by Sarah Dennant. It takes place in medieval Florence. I was in Florence last week with a very, very special and difficult to get ticket to see the secret Michelangelo rooms. And it inspired me to pick up this book from my adolescence about medieval Florence.
I love that. What is always in your suitcase or backpack when you travel?
Contact lenses and I mean, my eternal embarrassment as a travel entrepreneur is I need to become a better packer. So really, I have one of everything. I like the home comforts, but miniature size for sure.
Yeah, my packing only somehow gets worse every year, and I don't
That relieves
understand why.
me. That relieves me. I was like, I really should improve. The one thing that's changed is I travel so much that I kind of like have a go bag of like I don't even unpack. I don't even like duplicate. I just have the like toiletries, serums, all of that just ready to go where I can grab it and put it in there.
Yeah. To sojourn is to travel somewhere as if you live there. Where is some place that you would still love to sojourn?
I mean, The highest on my personal travel list is Japan. That's a trip that I've been waiting 15 years to do because I want to do it right. I want to do it with like a bankroll in my pocket for 3 weeks. I want to do it right. Could I see myself living there? I don't know. I've never been there, but that's high on my wish list for sure.
Yeah. What is something you eat that will immediately connect you to a place you've been?
Ooh, that's a great question. Um, this one's hard because I'm from Toronto, which is the most international city in the world, and so many food memories bisect their way through Toronto's amazing culinary scene. But I would say a dish that like maybe it's Sicily, like the granita that can't be replicated. The Sicilian sweets, they're sweet too from the way they do them there. It's just I leave my heart in Sicily, not just because their sweets are delicious, but also because their sweets are delicious. So let's say Sicilian granita.
It just reminded me, my daughter, one of the things that she most remembers from our travel experience, we were in Ostuni and
Ooh.
um, she got the gelato that they put in the like brioche bun and then like
Mhm.
seal back up. I don't know if that's super typical or not, but she's like, Mom, this is like French toast and gelato and, like, all of the magic things, and
Yes.
it's, like, hot on the outside and cool on the inside, and I don't know how it
How
happened.
old would she have been at that stage?
13.
Yeah, I can imagine, and, like, my 13-year-old self would have thought I'd hit the jackpot. So, the most typical version of that is actually Sicilian granita, more than a gelato and a brioche. Forgive me, Sicilians, but for those who don't know, a Sicilian granita is like if you can imagine the consistency of, like, a 7-Eleven slushie, but make it artigianale and delicious, and they would never use anything that 7-Eleven had ever heard of or touched, because Sicilian summers are so hot that they will have um, granita and brioche for breakfast. And so
Yeah.
her gelato sandwich is really a granita. You either dip or you put it in there. Yeah.
Yeah, oh my gosh, that would also, I'm sure, be one of her favorite food groups, so she'll have to put that on her list.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, set her
Um,
for years and then send her my way. She could be a Stellavision traveler.
I mean, she will, absolutely, she
So
cannot
sick.
wait. Um, let's see, who was a person that inspired or encouraged you to set out to travel the world?
Maybe my dad, though he did it inadvertently, but he and my mom as well obviously created this life that and he just traveled for work so much. This is maybe why he comes to my head first, but he was going places and I wanted to go them too. And he wasn't scared to move. Like I moved for university, not knowing anyone, and my parents kind of regretted creating children that had no fear to hop oceans, but they were the example. So
Yeah. If you could take an adventure with one person, fictional or real, alive or past, who would it be?
okay, so many, but the first person that's coming to mind is Tracy Ellis Ross, the actress. I just think she's like a badass. She obviously knows luxury and is really affirming in her single woman take on the world empowerment. But at the same time, through all her interviews, she really gives me the instinct that she wants to dive deep and I think we'd make good travel buddies. Why not?
Yeah, why not? If it can be anyone, you get to pick, so,
I mean, at my dinner party, there'd be a lot of people, but, she'd be one of them, and she's who came to mind.
um, the last question, who is one woman in the travel industry you admire and would love to recognize here in this space?
Um, I'm going to say Ronnie Chima. She owns Chima's Travels, and she really leads with her values as well in what she does. Does really interesting tours, has had a really interesting journey. Um, I've never heard of someone else auditioning travelers. Like she will call people to make sure they're a good fit. And I think that's ballsy and brilliant. And we haven't chatted in a while, but in those early imposter syndrome days, she was a resource. And I really appreciate her for that. She does
Yeah.
things.
I do still have application for my sojourns as well.
Brava, good for you.
Yeah.
I'm
I just
sad.
I'm curious, and And even more than making sure everyone's a harmonious fit, like, I also want to make sure the trip is what they think, and,
Mhm.
like, I wanna understand what they're looking for, and if this isn't, like, that moment, or maybe I just wanna make sure it's right for them um, and the group. So, yeah, that's part
Right.
of my
I
process.
mean, who knows? Like I said, had no assholes, but maybe my first asshole, and I'll change my tune and I'll get Ronnie.
I think when you are really, like you said, calling in your people, like, that's who shows up, and I would wanna trust that. But I also know women that have been in the industry a lot longer than I am, and they have the horror stories that make me, like, leave that on my website. Um, but regardless, that's a funny place for us to go ahead and end this conversation.
Leave off the podcast to gossips that we can go to.
Yeah.
Entrepreneur to entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad that we finally made this happen.
Me too, me too. And yeah, I look forward to seeing how things unspool for you. And definitely give me a shout if you are in Italy. We have some big things coming in 2025.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh. I wanted to make sure. We'll put it in the show notes, but if you can just tease, like, what's your favorite thing coming in 2025?
Well, we have announced our returning Sicilian trip, but there's a new Sicilian route landing, and that's all I can tease for now.
Okay, that's
Okay.
perfect. That's all we need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Soul of Travel, presented by Journey Woman. I hope you enjoyed the journey. If you loved this conversation, I encourage you to subscribe and rate the podcast. Please share episodes that inspire you with others, because this is how we extend the impact of this show. Learn more about each of my guests by reading our episode blogs, which are more than your average show notes. I think you'll love the connection. Find our episode blogs at www.souloftravelpodcast.com. I am so proud of the way these conversations are bringing together people from around the world. If this sounds like your community, welcome. I am so happy you are here. I am all about community and would love to connect. You can find me on Facebook at Soul of Travel Podcast, or follow me on Instagram either at she.sojourns or at Soul of Travel Podcast. Stay up to date by joining the Soul of Travel Podcast mailing list. You'll also want to explore the Journey Woman community and its resources for women travelers over 50. I'd also like to share a quick thank you to my podcast producer and content magician, Carly Eduardo, CEO of Convergente. I look forward to getting to know you and hopefully hear your story.